Okay.
Okay, Michael, are you okay to go?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah.
Okay, so hello, you're all very welcome. Fergus Dolan here from NALA, the National Adult Literacy Agency. We're delighted you could join us this morning for our literacy awareness webinar. My name is Fergus. I'm the Literacy Development Worker with NALA, and I'll give a short presentation about literacy awareness, and then I'll hand over to Michael Duffy from the NALA board to talk about his experience of learning and going back to learning. And then at the end, we're going to take questions, so you can type the questions in the questions box, or you can click on your hand symbol beside your name and we can unmute you for that. So okay, here goes. There's just a problem with me. Helen or Ailish, can you move the slide on to the second presentation? It won't let me do it because my computer's kind of
okay. Well, I think it's on your screen though, Fergus, is it?
Oh, so you can't. Okay, it's not letting me escape.
Do you want me to put the talk to? I'll flick the slides for you if you want.
Could you flick the slides for me? Yes. Or Ailish, if you could flick the slides for me.
Yeah. So if you are going to have to make me a presenter then, Fergus.
Okay.
So that I can put my screen up.
Okay, thanks.
And we'll still be able to hear you.
Ailish, can you do that actually, please?
I'm doing that now.
Sorry, thanks.
There you go, Helen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see it, Helen. Thanks a million. Yeah. So if you just move on to the second slide, then please.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
My computer is on its last legs. So, yeah, literacy is about listening and speaking. It's about reading and writing, but a big part of literacy is about self-confidence and self-esteem. Over the last 20 years, I've met hundreds of students who went back to literacy classes, and when I asked them what were the biggest thing, the biggest changes, the biggest difference since going back to literacy, many of them said that their self-confidence and self-esteem went way up because they could now read and write better and use technology and use numbers. So it's not just the technical things of reading and writing. The self-confidence, self-esteem is a huge part of literacy. And there's a good quote from Tom Sticht, an American academic who writes a lot on literacy, and it's something that we should all remember. His quote is, "A beginner reader is not a beginner thinker." So always have that in your mind when you are dealing with the public and you meet somebody who you think has a literacy difficulty, or who maybe they say to you if they have a literacy difficulty. Remember that a beginner reader is not a beginner thinker. So bear that in mind. Helen, if you could move on to the next slide, please. Thanks. Okay. The changing demands of literacy skills. This is something that it's very evident to us all today. So literacy skills are changing all the time. So a big example of that is what's happening this morning, the technology. Okay, you may have a family member, a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt who really struggles with the technology, and that can really cut them off from life and from society. There are so many things now that have switched to online, you know, whether it's booking flights or doing your car tax or whatever it is. A lot of things now, if you can't go online and can't sort it, get your something serviced, you know, you can't do it. So banking is a great example. So people who have not got fantastic technical skills can often lose out and fall behind and feel disenfranchised and disempowered. So that's something. So we say that literacy is a bit like a muscle. Use it or lose it. So the example could be that if you think back of, say, secondary school, and you did maybe Irish or French or something, that when you were 18 or whatever age you left school at 17, your Irish might have been so good, you know, maybe not brilliant, but not bad. But as each year goes by, and if you don't use that Irish or you don't use that French, it gets a little bit worse. Well, literacy is the same. If you were in school and you left school at, say, 14, 15, and your reading and writing was not brilliant, and then after school you took a job, you purposely maybe took a job where you didn't need literacy, you didn't need reading and writing because you knew your reading and writing was poor, and you didn't use reading and writing in the evening, you know, outside work, well then each year your reading and writing level would have gone down, just like a muscle going down when you don't use it. Okay, so we also talk about spikiness. We're all good at some things and not so good at others. So you might be good at maybe maths or technology, but you might not be so good at spelling. You might be good at reading, but not so good at writing. So we all have what we call spiky profiles. We're up and down on some things. And then context and purpose is important. So, you know, to consider the literacy in the immediate setting. So, for example, some people may have sufficient literacy that they're happy with their lives, that they can do what they want to do. But when they're thrown into a new situation like dealing with the revenue commissioners online, or if they have a medical emergency and they have to do a lot of reading up on the medical condition they have, how to check their bloods for diabetes or whatever it is, that new literacy skills, that new context might totally throw them. And we might all have experienced that a little bit. I struggle with technology and I have to try and keep up all the time. So the context and the purpose is important. Next slide, please, Helen. Thanks. Okay, so the impact of literacy. If at the center we have the learner, literacy has an impact on every aspect of a learner's life. Again and again, any adult literacy learners I met have stressed that we can't imagine how big an impact it has on their life if you've got poor reading and writing skills. So just on their personal development, there's so many things where instances where someone with literacy difficulties will not go to night class, will not improve themselves, will not volunteer for the local GA club or the resident association or the parents committee because they feel maybe embarrassed about their poor literacy skills. So on personal development, we often get a lot more out of those type of things I've mentioned than we do maybe out of our work. So they're missing out on that. On the green section there, you can see health and well-being. I mentioned health. If you have a health problem, you need to be able to read and understand complicated medical instructions to be able to take your medication properly, to check your bloods maybe, etc., to take a range of medication. And that is not easy. And we all have to educate ourselves on it and work hard on that to be sure we're doing that correctly. That a lot of studies on health literacy from the United States have and other countries have shown that people with low literacy skills have poorer outcomes from having health conditions, often because they didn't understand the medication or what they had to do, the change in their diet or their lifestyle to make things better. So you can see financial capability. A lot of people, I mentioned the online banking. If you can't do online banking today, there's often very limited options about banking, going into banks. As we all know, they're all closing and they're not very welcoming to the public in some cases. So it's very difficult to manage your finances if you don't have strong literacy skills. Maybe to recognize what a scam is or a phishing thing, where if you've strong literacy skills and are very competent technically with financial managing your financial aspects, you can see it a mile away. But if you're not strong, you might notice that. So it's quite nerve-wracking. Family and intergenerational. Sometimes literacy is an intergenerational thing. If parents both have literacy difficulties, it could be that the child or children have literacy difficulties. Tom Stick, the American academic I mentioned, showed research that the biggest impact on a child's literacy is the mother's motivation. Now, if there's two parents involved, it could be the parent's motivation. But even if that mother or parents have low literacy skills, if they're motivated and determined that their child will not have the same problems and suffer from the same literacy deficits, etc., that they did, well, that's the biggest factor. So, and then work. A lot of people with work who've got literacy difficulties say they never go for a promotion because they think that, and it's correct, that often with promotion they'll need literacy skills, maybe a supervisor or a warehouse job. And often sometimes if they do the work well, a few literacy students have told me that they were offered promotions and they just left the job because they didn't want to maybe admit that they had literacy difficulties. You know, someone saw that they were doing the job well for a few years and offered them the promotion, but they they couldn't take it because they knew the literacy skills let them down. And today, things like on a building site, you've got the safe pass and all. A lot of students come back to literacy classes because they're working away on the building site and they suddenly been told, well, you have to do the safe pass. And so they know that their literacy skills mightn't get them through that. And so they have to go back for literacy skills. Okay, society and citizenship, I mentioned that, voting, etc. Nala did a lot of work with students who spearheaded to get the photographs, the pictures of politicians on the voting, on the polling card. So that is so that a lot of people have told me that when they had literacy difficulties, they just didn't vote. You know, it's the first time you go into a polling station, it's exciting because you've never voted for, but it's a tiny bit nerve-wracking because you have to tick off some box and then bring it away. And so some people are just afraid they'll do the wrong thing, or they're afraid that it's public and people are looking at you. So that, you know, active citizenship is something that people with literacy difficulties often don't have a part of their lives. Okay, Helen, I'm ready to move on to the next slide. Sorry about this. So our aim is to help people improve their skills. Okay, so that's Nala's aim. Every citizen has a right to literacy and numeracy. So research shows that better literacy and numeracy gives people more choices, it increases their income, and it improves their health. I've kind of touched on all those things, but those make sense. Okay, Helen, ready to go? Thanks. So Nala's aim and the aim of today's webinar, if you take away one thing from today's webinar, here's what it is, I think. It's to get more public-facing organizations like your organization and like you, people who work in public-facing organizations, to adopt a whole organization approach to literacy and numeracy. It won't be good enough if you listen to what Michael has to say today and go away and think that's interesting, I should change a little bit. We want you to go back to your organization and say to your colleagues, we need to change, we need to be more literacy friendly, we need to make a bigger effort to embrace literacy and encourage people who've got literacy difficulties to use our service and to make our service more accessible for people with literacy difficulties. Later in this presentation, we'll talk about the percentage of Irish people with literacy difficulties, and you'll see that there are a lot of people with literacy difficulties out there. So there are a lot of people using your service with literacy difficulties, and maybe you're not that welcoming to them, and maybe you're unaware of that, or maybe they're not using your service because you're not very accessible to them. So if you could change one thing today, it's change your habits and your work, and also work with your colleagues to change what they do, how your information is presented, how you verbally present, etc. Think about how you do things. Okay, Helen, I'm ready for the next slide. Thanks. Okay, we're going to look at the causes and effects of unmet literacy needs. Okay, Helen, ready to go again. Thanks. Okay, so some people have their literacy needs met. So everybody has different literacy levels. So some people say who with not strong literacy needs might still have sufficient literacy needs that they're happy with their life, dealing with their family and their work or their communities, whatever community it is, if it's in the GAA or the resident association or their family, the WhatsApp group in their family, or, you know, communicating with their kids via email or Skype or whatever. But there can be many reasons why people have not had their literacy needs met, have poor literacy skills. So there can be physical and psychological. There can be educational reasons. So maybe they have dyslexia. Some people reckon that 9% of the population have some form of dyslexia. It can be dyspraxia, can be dyscalculia, which is a kind of like kind of dyslexia with numbers, with maths. Okay, could be social and economic reasons. A lot of the reasons are social and economic, you know, getting supports there, the schools they go to, getting supports, the parents having the kind of power and control and influence to help their kid and go into the school and demand more support for their kid. Can be family reasons. I mentioned literacy can sometimes be an intergenerational thing, and it can be the change in literacies with the technology that I mentioned. So there can be a range of reasons why people have not had their literacy needs met. Okay, Helen, ready for the next one? Okay, so literacy and inequality or equality, and you might have guessed this. Literacy is a good barometer for equality. So research shows us that people with the lowest skills levels have low educational attainment. That's not surprising. Earn less income in most cases, are more likely to be unemployed. So if you lose your job today in the recession that we're going to probably have as a result of COVID, and you have low or no literacy skills, it'd be much more difficult to find a new job than someone who's been working away on his high literacy skills. And they've got poor health. I mentioned the health and the health outcomes if you get a health problem. I mentioned that. So these percentages that we're talking about are higher in communities that have been further marginalized, such as maybe early school leavers, people with disabilities, people from the traveling community, and people maybe currently in prison or soon to be released from prison. Okay, Helen, ready to go with the next slide. Okay, so what effect can low literacy have on students? Now, this is different with each student, so this is quite generalized. So with another student, they might say, no, I had none of those things, but quite a lot of students have said some of these things. So limited employment prospects and limited promotion prospects. When they get a job, they often have to stay in the same job for years and years because they know with the promotion they need more literacy skills. Sense of failure, that is something they might feel or might not. They might feel bad that they have a literacy difficulty and they feel, yeah, maybe embarrassed by it, maybe ashamed, maybe not. They could probably have a negative attitude to school. I've met, as I said, hundreds of literacy students over the years, and I can't remember one literacy student saying to me that they had a good experience in school. Most of them had a kind of fear and an uncomfortable feeling in their stomach. They told me a lot of days when they were afraid to be asked a question, or afraid to stand up and read, that the teacher might insult them or offend them, or that fellow pupils might laugh or snigger. So it's different with each, but a lot of students have told me stories like that. They might have a poor self-image. I talked at the beginning about literacy, it's about self-confidence, self-esteem. They're huge parts of literacy. So when students go back to literacy classes and improve their literacy, they often have much better self-image. Okay, and stigmatization by society. NALA and the Literacy Service and you, by coming along to this webinar today, are trying to reduce that. The stigma is falling all the time, and the more we get organizations to buy into and understand literacy and become more literacy friendly, well, then we reduce that stigma. But it's something you have to do with your colleagues and with your organization. You can't just take in a few messages from today and go back, and you need to spread the word at work. Okay, Helen, next one, please. Okay, I'm going to talk about the literacy levels. So there's 5 levels of literacy, and this is just an example to show you what level 1 question is. So if you're given, you're shown that it's a packet of yogurt and you're shown how much sugar is in the pot of yogurt. Most of us do scanning, so we don't read every single line. We don't read nutrition facts, serving size. We scan down, and near the bottom we see the word sugar. And at the word sugars, we see 1 gram, 1G. So within a few seconds, most people have scanned down quickly and seen sugar 1G and brought sugar 1G. Someone with a literacy difficulty, who, this is a level 1 question, will read every single line of that table. And by the time they've got down to the end, they're completely exhausted and tired, and they've forgotten what the question is, or, you know, they don't have the skill to scan. So they can't find that. So that is an example of level 1. So normally we're doing these training sessions and there's people in the room, and I'll throw out the question, what percentage of Irish adults do you think are at level 1? So with poor literacy skills, and people guess. So you can guess now in your head, and you might guess 2 or 3%, you might guess 10%, you might guess 15%. I don't know what you guess. So it's normally much better in the classroom when you all guess, and I say, what do you think? What do you think? And then someone gets it right, and someone says, oh, 18, 20%. I go, spot on, that's it. So 18%. 1 in 6 Irish adults are at that level, the lowest level of literacy. So it's definite, it's sure that people who come into your organization or access your service or try to access your service are at level 1. So their literacy levels are poor. So you need to change the way you work and the way your organization works and the way your organization deals with people and presents information to the public to make your information more accessible. You have to do it. Okay, Helen, next slide, please. So there's that again. 1 in 6 are at the lowest level of literacy, and 1 in 4 have a major problem with maths. So 1 in 4 can't have problems dividing up a bill in a restaurant or a cafe, or figuring out a timetable at a train station or in a bus stop. Okay, 1 in 4, 25% of Irish adults between the age of 16 and 65. It's colossal. Okay, next slide, please, Helen. Okay, that's the adult. Those figures were from the Adult Skills Survey from 2013. The results came out in 2015. The survey comes up every 8 years or so. It's done by the OECD. So Ireland, you often hear Irish people saying, "Oh, we have a great education system." We don't really, it kind of suits who it suits. It suits those with money and power, So because Ireland, look at the first box there, the red box with the lady holding up the books. Ireland is 17th. Is the 17th place in literacy and 18th place in numeracy out of 24 countries. Okay, so they were mainly countries from Western Europe, or from Europe and from Asia, like Japan, Korea, and from the United States and Canada. But look how far down we are. So the next time somebody says to you, "Oh, Ireland is a great education system," just say, "Well, I'm not so sure about that." Okay, so 1 in 6 Irish adults, over 500,000 Irish adults, over 500,000 are at or below level 1 of literacy, and 750,000 Irish adults are at or below level 1 of numeracy. People accessing your service will be there in that box, large numbers, and people who don't access your service will be there because your service is not literacy friendly, and they can't access it. They cannot access it because your service isn't literacy friendly enough. All you have is a website. Oh, to hell, it's on the website. Let them sort it. Not good enough. Sorry. Okay, Helen, next one. Thanks. So that's another example of maybe at level 1. The example is to read and understand the instructions on the back of a packet of painkillers, so anodine, disprin, whatever. To read those instructions and understand, I can take 2 tablets. Someone with a literacy difficulty will read every single word of that. By the time they get to the end, they're tired and they've forgotten what they're looking for. While you most likely will scan it. You'll scan down quickly and go, "I can take 2 tablets." Or if you're giving it to your kid, the kid can take 1 tablet and then 8 hours later or whatever. We all scan and we do that. But somebody with literacy difficulty will read every single word. And it'll be like you, if you did German in school for 3 years or French in school for 3 years, and 20 years later, you might be able to read it, but you don't understand it. It's kind of something like that, possibly for literacy. Okay, Helen, next slide, please. Okay, what these results tell us is that, not surprisingly, people with the lowest skills levels have low educational attainment, earn less income, are more likely to be unemployed, and have poor health. We've gone over this. It provides evidence that mass participation in the mainstream education system isn't sufficient today to produce strong literacy and numeracy skills for life. Okay, so the Irish education system doesn't always work. Thanks, Helen. So what you need to look out for in your job, what you need to look out for, possible signs, because most people with a literacy difficulty won't come in and tell you. They're not brave enough to say, approach the counter or over the phone or on the website. I don't know how you do it on a website. Say, "I have poor literacy skills. You need to help me here." So here's signs you can look out for if they've emailed you, or if they phoned you, or if they're in your building at your desk. They're asking for information that's already displayed. They're unwilling to approach the front desk counter. Maybe you see it in the body language. Their body language includes uneasy facial expressions. They're confused. If it's a health thing, they're confused about their illness, how many tablets they have to take, etc. They give excuses to avoid reading or writing in front of you. So they'll often take a form and say, I'll bring that home and I'll bring that in tomorrow or whatever. They might describe medication by color. Is that the blue one? That kind of thing. Is that the red one? So they might be reluctant to fill in a form. They might they could be okay at filling in their name, address, and maybe telephone number, but then they might just stop, or they might put the wrong information in the wrong box. They mightn't attend meetings. You've asked them back for a meeting at this time, but they mightn't come back. They might come back the wrong day, wrong time. They're not filling out the forms completely. You say something like, "Oh, I forgot my glasses," or "My wife looks after that," or whatever. Okay, so just watch out for the cues. Watch out for, those type of things where someone's uneasy, and don't be hasty with them. Try and be helpful. And maybe if they're one-to-one and there isn't a queue behind them and people can't hear you, if you're pretty sure that you could say something like, well, do you need help with that form, or can I help you with that? Or, you know, and maybe if they open up with you and say, yeah, well, I've real difficulty reading and writing, then later I'm going to come on to how you make a good referral. We'll talk about the Adult Literacy Centre. Okay, next slide, please, Helen. Thanks. Okay, so responding to literacy needs. Maybe you could do this. You could explain information that's clearly or instructions. So you could explain what's written there. Okay, you could use the language that they've been using, that other people who have struggled with this have used, maybe more simple language, and don't use the language of the office, the kind of jargonistic language, but use simpler language. You could offer to fill out the form. Now, don't sign it for them. First, ask nicely, would you like me to help you with that? Would I fill that? Would you like me to help you? Would you like me to help you fill that out? And if they say yeah, then at the end, get them to sign. Don't sign for them. You could note down that Mary Brady, whatever the person name is, has literacy needs, and remind other staff who you know your colleague will be dealing with them in the future. Just say, I think John Smith struggles with literacy. Be aware. You know, you could tip off colleagues. You can include family members in the discussion if that is appropriate or suitable. You could assist in filling out forms. You could use visual aids, etc. So there are a range of ways which you could sensitively and subtly help someone who you feel has a literacy difficulty, or who maybe has admitted to you that they have a literacy difficulty. Okay, Helen, next one. Okay, the local adult literacy service. So this is if you've asked the person, do you need help with that? And they said yes. And then you say, well, do you know that there's an adult literacy service? It's free, it's confidential, and it's in every big town in Ireland, even a lot of small towns, because a lot of people don't know that there is an adult literacy service. It's run by the ETB. ETB stands for Education and Training Board. ETB was called the VECs. Okay, so the ETB Adult Literacy Centre in every county in Ireland, in most towns. Okay, and the Adult Literacy Centre, they deliver. There's 16 education and training boards. It's free. It's confidential, as I said. There can be small groups of maybe 3-4 people in classes, or sometimes there's one-to-one. It's delivered by trained tutors, and they can work towards QQI awards if they want awards. A lot of people who go back to literacy don't have junior cert or don't have leaving cert, so they're maybe interested in awards, QQI awards at level 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, so for a list of adult literacy services, you can go on to that nala.ie/courses. Okay, thanks, Helen. Also, NALA have a distance learning website. It's called Learn with NALA. Now, if you're not an adult literacy tutor, it might be that interesting for you, but we had a website for about 15 years called Right On, and this is kind of a newer version, updated. So it's a teaching and learning website. It's free. There's free tuition. It's numeracy. It's literacy. It's digital learning. Levels 1 to 4. So level 4 goes up to leaving cert. Okay, level 1 is kind of where students are at in primary school. Level 3, it goes up like that anyway. And there's recognition of prior learning, that's RPL, recognition of prior learning, and there's certification. So there's those QQI awards. Okay, if you're interested, or if the students you're interested, or the person who comes in is interested, they can email freephone@nala.ie, or there's a number. Okay, I'll send this presentation afterwards to everyone who's registered for this webinar. Okay, I think I'm going behind time, so I better hurry it, because Michael has to get in. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, okay.
Becoming literacy friendly. So I've kind of touched on a lot of this. Your service has to take account of 18% of the Irish population at the bottom one, at level 1 of literacy level. So you have to think of your service and think about how can you make things better. So look at the environment when you walk into your office, or when you first look at your website. You know, is it literacy friendly? Is information very well spaced out and in plain English? Staff awareness. It's not good enough if you today walk away and you're aware. You need to inform your staff members. Maybe approach NALA and we'll give you a tailored literacy awareness session for your colleagues, for you and your staff members. You know, it's not just good enough you alone, because if you're not there, or there's another phone call, or the next desk someone comes up, you need all staff to be literacy aware. Okay, there has to be verbal communication, has to also be done through plain English. Cannot use the jargon that you use with your colleagues or that you use with people in the service you work in. Nala are guilty of it too. We all use the jargon of our service. When I'm talking to my colleagues Ailish and Helen, I use the jargon of the adult literacy world. But when I'm outside the adult literacy world, I try not to use that jargon because people outside that sector just aren't crystal clear what I'm talking about. Okay, and your printed material, maybe look again at your printed material on your website to say, is it in plain English? Because people with literacy difficulties can read and write a little bit, most of them. Sorry, I've got my headset caught. But they're not great. So if your information is in plain English, it really helps. The benefits to your organization are, and to the service user, are a clear understanding of what you offer and what you're giving them. More effective communication from you. You will get much less follow-on phone calls and people turning up on the wrong day if your information is clear at the beginning. We do a lot of what we call literacy awareness training sessions in trio offices, so social welfare offices, and they tell us, yeah, if they've changed the way they do the letters in plain English and they change the communication sets, so maybe they ring people and explain you've to come in on Tuesday at 11, that they get a lot less follow-on calls to say, well, what day do I come in, or people coming in the wrong day. So it saves you and your organization time as well. It's more efficient. There's better access for people who've got a literacy difficulty. There's greater participation in your service, whatever it is you offer. It fulfills national standards and it's a better impact. Whatever you want, it gives a better impact. Okay, Helen, next slide, please. Okay, what you can do. So I'm going to fly through these, but I'm sure I've said a lot of these already. You can be understanding, you can be sensitive and non-judgmental. Okay, you can remind service users, customers, that what they say to you is in confidence. Okay, you can offer help and support if possible. You can use plain English in your writing, on your website, and in what you say to them. You can give the person plenty of opportunity to ask questions. Don't rush them if you feel, from the body language that they might be struggling with this. And you consider solutions if appropriate, for example, giving the phone number of the local ETB Adult Literacy Centre, or give out a leaflet about NALA's distance learning service. There you see www.learnwithnala.ie. Okay, the don'ts. Now, these should be obvious. Don't use jargon, don't make assumptions, don't suggest a customer needs to learn to read, and don't lose patience and grab the thing off them, start filling out a form for them. Okay, be polite and sensitive. Okay, Helen, ready to move to the next one? Thanks. So I'm going to fly through these. This is a little bit repeated. So think with plain English. Think of the person that you're aiming the information for. So don't use the jargon, don't use the Latin terms, don't use the French terms, keep the sentences short. Think of who you're aiming this information for. Be direct and use the active voice. Okay, avoid jargon. That's vital. Don't use the jargon. Okay, define unfamiliar abbreviations or acronyms. Every organization, every sector has abbreviations and acronyms. It's okay using them with your colleagues, but not with a service user who may not be involved in that service. Okay, avoid Latin and French expressions and have an average of 15 to 20 words in a sentence. If you have more than 15 or 20 words, I guarantee you can put a full stop in the middle and make 2 sentences. Okay, next one, Helen, please. So why use plain English? You have better access. Your service users and potential service users have better access to your service, better understanding of what you offer. There'll be fewer mistakes, fewer callbacks, fewer people turning up on the wrong day, fewer people filling in the wrong form, fewer people taking away the wrong form. If you just do it better at first, there'll be fewer questions. It saves you time and you money, and your organization time and money. Okay, messages reach more people more effectively. And there's something Helen put in about a Princeton survey, showed that people regarded writers who use unnecessarily complicated words and typefaces as less intelligent than those who used everyday language and clear fonts. That's interesting. Okay, next one, Helen. Okay, plain speaking. We've gone across that. It's the same as plain English. You have to speak to people not using jargon in very plain language. You could maybe at the end check for understanding, ask them to explain what you've explained to be sure they've understood it. Okay, It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Okay. Simply Put is a website that NALA have about plain English. You can look at simplyput.ie, and there's lots of tips on writing information, using information, on what bold to use, what fonts to use, bullet points, color, spacing. There's lots of ideas on how to write and present websites or documents. So next slide, Helen. So one small change. Once again, this is kind of better if you're in the room with us and we go around everyone and ask one small change. So you can think this one in your head. If you're not thinking about lunch or a cup of coffee, you can think, is there one small change or one thing that you could do at work? Surely there is. And maybe you could change it, and maybe you could talk to a colleague who you know also deals with members of the public. And what else could your workplace do to become more literacy friendly? There are definitely things that your workplace could do. The way they present information, maybe the interview process, maybe the queuing system, maybe the information stuck up, maybe the way that when people walk in, they have to go to a screen and type in, and that just doesn't suit some people. So maybe think again, and maybe try and get senior management involved, you know, and they're all delighted with their new screens as you walk in, and you don't have to talk to anybody, and it's touch screen and you sort everything. But maybe that just doesn't work for 18% of the population. So have a think about that. Okay, Helen, next screen. I think this is the last one, thank God. Yeah. So that's my name and my email. If you want any further follow-up, as I said, if you think that there are people in your organization, a group of maybe 10 or more, who want a tailored or customized literacy awareness session, just drop me an email and we can organize that. So thanks, Helen, for doing the slides. My computer didn't crash yet, even though it doesn't work very well. I'm now going to hand you over to Michael Duffy from the NALA board to talk to you about his learning journey. So Michael, away you go.
Thank you, Fergus, for that. I don't know how I follow that presentation, but my story is that I went back to education. As judged by the hair is receding, and I went back to education at the age of 57. Up to that, I was unable to read. Well, when I say unable to read, as Fergus said, I could read name, address, telephone number, things like that. But to actually read a book, read a sentence like a minute like that was beyond me. I couldn't do that. I got a job I finished school at the age of 13. Well, I didn't go every day when I was at it, but I finished school at 13, and I got a job with a local farmer doing bits and bobs where you didn't need to be able to count up to 5 to get your job. And then later on, I got a job in a milk processing plant, and which the money was very good. And as a young lad, that's all you were interested at the time. And if you could count up to 10 or 15, that was all the education you needed at that time. That was back in the 70s. And kept going on ahead for a number of years at that. And as we all know, the recession came in and destroyed an awful lot of things. But technology was coming into the forefront. And I used to hear people talking about the Facebooks, the WhatsApps, or whatever it was. And I hadn't a clue what that was, anything about it. So a friend of mine who I used to do a lot of work for gave me a present of a laptop. And so I didn't know what this thing was. I knew what it was, but I didn't know how to use it or anything like that. It sat in the room for, I don't know how long, for 6 months, nearly 12 months, with dust building up on it. But in our local village, Gillishandra, there was a computer course starting. So I said, this thing is sitting here, I may as well try how to use it. So I signed up for the computer course anyway, and went in and sat down and pushed the button. Sure, I thought it was going to be like Bill Gates in a few weeks, but that didn't happen, of course. But what I wasn't aware of was, for doing the course, it was a level 3 course. It's for computer skills, and you had to prepare a portfolio for it. And that involved the pen, that involved writing, that involved things like that, which I didn't think was going to happen. So I informed I was getting very jiggly at this. So I informed the tutor that I was going to have a problem. I wasn't really fit to complete this course because I couldn't. I made all kinds of excuses, but fair play to the tutor. She could read the signs, like Fergus was alluding to there. And she got in contact, got the AOL of Cavan to come out and talked to me and persuaded me that I should stick with it. And she send me up for a one-to-one tutor and help me in the reading and writing department. And I went along with that. I'd done that for 6 to 9 months. And it worked out well. I was getting a sort of a hunger for learning at that stage. And I kept moving on anyway, little by little, and I got to know how to use my computer. And it didn't blow up or anything like that. And I got to learn more into different aspects of education. And then I transferred into a group setting, which was a step up. It was a level 3 communications course in a group setting. There was 10 of us in the class, I think, at the time. It's back some time ago. And I really liked that. It was very, very tough now. I must admit, very tough. But I got through it. And when I went up, there was a presentation in our local hotel, Kilmore. And when I went up and got the QQI certificate presented to me, that was a fantastic thing to have achieved, because I would never have thought that I could possibly achieve such an accolade like that. It may seem a small thing to educated people, but to me it was like winning the lotto. And it gave me the hunger to move on. And then I started to get interested in reading books. You'd hear about things. There was something that was very much in the forefront at the time back then, was the tobacco in Taipan with Roy Keane and Niall Quinn. And I was very interested in that. I'll not say what side I was on, but I was very interested in that. And I got a little book on it, and I read the book. I say I read it. I read a couple of lines of it and studied it, and I read another couple of lines. And eventually, over a long period of time, I got to see into more the reality of the story rather than what was portrayed on the media. And that gave me a hunger to keep on read more about different people's lives and things like that. And I got a hunger for reading books. But personally, for me, the big change for me was I felt more confident in myself. I could participate in more conversations. Like we say, see something before this, something would be in the newspaper, the local newspaper or the national newspaper, and you'd be afraid to start to talk about it because somebody could ask you a question in relation to it. You weren't able to read it, so therefore you weren't fit to comment on it. But after doing the courses and things like that, you could take a comment on it, you could read about it, and you could participate in the conversation with more confidence in yourself. And not only, and when I say confidence in yourself, that also helped with my well-being, my mental health, my physical health, and everything like that. Now, I didn't suffer with mental health problems, but it helped me more confident out there. I had a great interest in amateur dramatics, and I used to go to a lot of it, but of course I never took part. And if someone had said, you should act, you should do something like that, and I'd say, no, I have something else to do. I can't be doing that. I'm too busy. But that, I wouldn't have time. But the real reason was, and I have to admit it now, I was unable to read the script. They would hand me the script and say, you take a look at that. God, you'd be interested in that, Michael, you know. And I was very interested, but I was fit or unfit to read the script. So therefore, that was a door that was closed to me. I couldn't take part in that. And that was something I used to go back away from the theatre, a little theatre in our local area. And I used to feel sad with myself. Gosh, I'm missing out on that. You know, I'd say to myself. And that was a sort of a catalyst to make me move on and do something about it, not just sit on my laurels and just think about it and just go home and feel sorry for myself or doing like that. I wanted to do it, and I was determined to do it. And I think a lot of it, people come back to education. I think they have to have the hunger in themselves to go back to do it. And it made me feel good in myself, made me feel happy and more confident. I'm fit to participate more in society and local events, such as I said, amateur dramatics, which isn't happening now, of course, and different events like that. And that for me was a big step. And also another point that Fergus brought up there, we say the world's turned more digital now, which is a great thing and a wonderful thing for an awful lot of people. But people with literacy difficulties and things like that, it is a barrier. It's a huge barrier to a lot of people with literacy. You walk into a bank, like, I mean, you even walk into some of the burger places, like, I mean, and you have to touch screens. Like, I mean, you walk into a bank, it's a screen you're talking to. You very rarely see a human being there. You very seldom see a human person. I don't know what happened to the screen there, it simply went funny. And I think that's affecting people psychologically too, because people, we're a nation of people. We like to talk to people. We like to see the human interaction. We're not really interested in talking to machines, like when you go into a bank and talk to them. I know we can't avoid, and I know what's happening. I know that, and I'm probably sitting in the dark ages saying things like that shouldn't happen. But I mean, you see older people, like, I mean, using smart cards, like, I mean, for withdrawing their pensions or whatever like that, use remembering PIN numbers. Some of those older people wouldn't remember their name, and then they're asked to remember a PIN number. Like, I mean, I think that's a wee bit of a discrimination, and I think that's something that should be looked at, because asking someone in their 70s, 80s to remember a PIN number to put in to get to withdraw money or withdraw things like that, I think that's a bit of a discrimination, because, as I said, those people mightn't remember their address, their name, or anything about them, but still you ask them to remember a name, which I think is unjust. I think that's discrimination. And another thing is you're going to fill out forms in some offices. Now, I'd have to say that I never had a bad experience going into any public service office, from a taxi car to a social welfare office to a doctor's office. I must say I never had a bad experience. Oh, I had one, but that was the person themselves. But we'll not go into that. But I think it's very important to identify someone that goes into a public building, a public office, like, I mean, that's dealing with social welfare, dealing with citizen information, dealing with something like that, for people to recognise, well, why is that person asking me that question? Should that note is up on the board there, should they can see it? Why are you asking me that? That's a signal, and that's something that should be recognised and picked up. I know that your staff and yourselves are very busy and probably undermanned and things like that, but it's something to be aware of. And I think if you improve people's literacy, you improve their mental health. Not only the mental health, but you improve the physical health. And maybe mental health, physical health, they are linked. I work with an organisation to dealing with people with suicide awareness. And I see people come in to me and they have literacy issues, and they also have other issues, obviously, too. But I think one a wee bit is a little bit claimed into the other, because if you have poor literacy skills, you feel you need it. I can't go in there. I wouldn't fit in there. I couldn't go to the local golf club, like, I mean, I wouldn't be one of those people. So you have a class discrimination there, which doesn't help people's well-being, which contributes to anxiety, which contributes to other things. And that's where I'm coming from now. And I think it's very important to address that, because if you address that and you address the medical problems of people with anxiety, which can lead to high blood pressure, diabetes, heart problems, and other complications, which puts a strain on the Department of Health and things like that, medication, things like that, and doctors. So if you can improve the people's well-being by improving their literacy, overall, we're all winners. And that's my piece now. And thank you for listening. Okay, Fergus, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks a million, Michael. That was great. That was lovely. Really touching. So it was a strong message, and I appreciate your honesty and your bravery. Thanks, Michael. I realized that I went way over time, so I apologize for that. And I'm just going to stop the recording now.